this is my Friday afternoons, I'm realizing, are just
you
not
guys are
good
you're
for me.
busy.
Just because.
Hey everybody. How are you? How are you?
What's going on?
So yeah, we were just talking about the weather.
Been a minute.
Yeah. No, it's been hot here. Like I said, it was 111, which is too hot.
I was reading something interesting. I guess neither of us could really speak about this, but somebody told me that it's easier in a sense or more natural to be a carnivore in a colder climate. That somebody said, I forget where it was. It was somebody who's not a carnivore, but has tried carnivore and is more sort of intuitive. And they said, I thrived as a carnivore when I was living like in upstate New York. And then they moved to Florida and they felt like they had to introduce some fruit in order to regain that sort of good feeling they had as a carnivore in upstate New York. Again, I don't know. I don't know how anyone could prove that, but it wasn't interesting.
See, like I mentioned that I'm more tolerant of heat before. Like I don't like 111. I don't like it when it gets 115, but I'm more tolerant of it. Like yesterday, I kept having to move my feet because I go out in bare feet all the time. I don't wear shoes much. And the pavement was so insanely hot, I could have thrown the hamburgers on the ground and cooked them. So I had to keep moving my feet, but I was out there grilling in front of my grill, like when it was 111 and didn't break a sweat. And even in the cold, I'm more tolerant of the cold. So it's like you have this ability to tolerate temperatures more. And I don't know. I mean, that dude that had it might have had that feeling. I don't know. I don't know if the fat in the cold has something thermogenic.
How can you explain not sweating at all? Like what is that?
I don't know. I'm not as fat. I don't have 120 pounds of insulation that I used to sweat. I don't know.
That's amazing.
But I can stand there. I'm not really doing any work. You know, I'm just standing there grilling, but the grill's a hot grill. It's insanely hot, you know, with all the burners cranked. And I'm just kind of thinking, man, this is just like, you know, I'm just kind of cringing back. But I notice that I don't get. Now, if I go out and work, I'll sweat, you know, when it's 100 degrees out. Like if I'm out trimming the trees or going on a hike or something, which I don't do it when it hits 100, I stop. Even when it hits 90, I kind of stop.
At what point does it hit 90? Like 8 a.m.?
Oh no, it was like 90 last night. Like when I went to bed a little bit later at 10, it was still 90 something. And this morning, I think it was like 88 or something like that, or 89 in the morning at 4:30 in the morning. I'm talking like early in the morning. It's over right now. The thing is over. So I'll try to look here what they say for. See, like tomorrow though. Actually, tomorrow it shows it's going to be a low of 85.
Oh, interesting.
So, and that's probably like 3 a.m. because by like 4 or 5 a.m. it starts, you know.
Right.
And what they show there might be a little different, right, than where I live by a couple degrees. But I looked this morning when I got up and at 4:30, I think it was actually like 88. I think it wasn't quite 90 yet, but it was 90. I know.
Do you eat less when it's so hot, or is it basically pretty consistent with what you eat all year?
It's a good thought. I think right now, I'm so variable because I'm still kind of messed up because of my dad and my friend. And, you know, there's still a lot of junk in my head, you know, and worrying about my mom. And it's like one of those things that I'm going to say, I think I'm more variable. I think actually maybe that's what it is. Because I'm trying to think back to last year, you know, and talking about the cold, I think it's consistent, but I'm more variable on what I eat. Because over the what's interesting is, you know, I gained weight with my dad passing and all this. And I'm staying at this weird plateau, and I'm not trying hard to push it down. I'm trying to see if it naturally comes down, because now it's just a experiment to see what's happening. And I think as of today, I'm going to start making it come down, and I can make it, you know, by just doing some fasts, doing more fasts, and really cutting out any extra dairy that I do have or something else.
Right.
Um, what's interesting? I had pork rinds finally. It's been over a year since I've had them, and we were
Mhm.
going to do a 4th of July thing, and I'm like, okay, I'll just get a bag, and I just got a bag of pork rinds. I didn't get a whole big Costco tub. I just got a bag.
Mhm.
But it is interesting because I haven't had those in forever, and I don't really care for them anymore. That's what was weird. It's
So
been so
interesting.
long. I was just like, I maybe I'll do them next year.
Why do you think carnivores over time, now this isn't true of everybody, but I think it's true of me, it sounds like it's true of you, we lose the taste for almost anything but ruminant animals. Like, I don't really like, I don't dislike chicken,
And now
but I
he
don't
is.
feel a desire for it.
Yeah, I
And
don't know what it is.
yeah, yeah.
I really
I
don't
still
know what it is.
yeah, it is an interesting question. Maybe it's the foods the animals eat. Like with beef, we're pretty like they eat grass mainly. I mean, even if they're not grass
Yeah.
fed, they mainly eat grass, and they can be finished with grains to fatten them up at the end. But there's a
And there's
pretty
also no grass available then. I really wonder if you put grass in front of them or grain in front of them, which one they would go for. I wonder if that's like their ice cream. Not to interrupt you. You know what I mean? I'm
an
curious
interesting
about that
question.
now.
It's an interesting question. Um, I, I don't know, because chickens eat anything, so there's probably more. They'll eat seeds. So certain things that make seed oils bad, like you may get a little bit of that from chicken or pork. I don't know. There's definitely a more varied diet. Um, Even eggs. Just I did a video today about six months on the lion diet, and somebody
Yeah, I
commented
saw
that
that.
yeah, taking out eggs was transformative for them, which is interesting because I
Yeah.
love eggs. I don't really have a taste much for them anymore, but they don't do any harm. But for this person, giving up eggs was incredible. I
Yeah.
wonder what that is.
I don't know. This is why I kind of say just try it. Just try the lion for,
Yeah.
you know, 90 days and see what happens. I'll answer this really quickly. Why make my natural weight come down? Because I've been at 178 pounds for over 3 years. And with all the stress dump, if you don't know the quick background, my dad passed away recently. And then my best friend passed away. And then another friend passed away. And it was just like, I did make a joke, like, I don't want anybody to be friends right now with me because it was just this bad. It's just been a really rough year. So I think it was just cortisol dumping and stuff like that. And me kind of, I'm still clean. I'm still carnivore. I don't go outside and eat breads and grains and junk. I don't ever binge on anything. So I just want to get back down to where I was. So that's why I'm not in a hurry. And that's also why I haven't been worrying about pushing the weight back down. But now it's purely an experiment for me to say, okay, so I've been at this weird upper weight now with 20 pounds on me for the last 4 months, I think. How do I push it back down if I want to push it back down in a healthy way that's not really going to change things? Maybe just exclude some of the parm cheese I have and change what I'm eating or when I'm eating and just to see. So it's strictly, I'm not really worried about it because I don't feel like nobody really knows I'm 20 pounds more than I was. I
Hmm.
can sense it a little bit, but it's like I just want to now do it as an experiment to bring it back down and then see if I plateau back out because I was that at that position for so long.
Do you think we all have a kind? I mean, this is, I guess, not a totally accepted theory in nutrition. Do you think we all have a sort of natural weight, or is it just whatever feels right?
I think we have a natural weight because when I was in Hawaii, like when I was in my 20s through 30s and working on the boats, and I've showed those pictures of me working on the boat really lean, I was always at 178 pounds, which is interesting that I did eventually tap back down to 178 pounds even here in my 50s.
Hmm.
And I only know because we had this huge, like when we would work at the resorts, we'd have to come through like the back entrance, if you will, into the resort to
Mhm.
get down to where we would pick up the manifest for the day. And they had one of these huge scales, that would go to like 1,000 pounds that you could put pallets on. and it
Mm.
was a really accurate scale. And every day I would walk over the weight just as a fun joke, like, oh, how much am I today? And then it started like being really weird because I never went ever than like a pound difference. So even
Wow.
back then I was always kind of curious. So I do remember that because I remember seeing that, the Toledo scale weight, whatever name, and the whole thing shift. So I think we do have an optimum weight. And I think the only reason that we go over or under it is like maybe stress more than I thought,
Hmm.
and I have been consuming more dairy than usual. And I have been doing this egg thing because you talked about eggs. I'm
What's the
allergic
egg
to
thing?
egg whites. I'm really viciously allergic to egg whites. And I'm going to do a video on this. So every year I test eggs. And if I eat 3 eggs for 10 days, I'm bad. If I eat 10 eggs for 3 days, I'm bad. 30 is about my cutoff point where my skin just starts just itching like a madman. And
Whites
and every
or just
whites,
yeah. Mm.
just the whites. Like because I'll eat eggs and I've stopped and I've eaten just the egg yolks, and it's something. And this is like, I eat the egg yolks only, and that's an interesting thing because people have asked that. It's like, oh, have you tried that? And it's like, yeah, I've tried that. I'm pretty good at that, but it's like it didn't do it. So this year, a couple months ago, I'm like, okay, I'm going to test eggs again. And the one problem too that I'm having with my weight, I think sustaining the last 2 months, is I do put cheese in my eggs because I like eggs and cheese blended together.
The dairy.
And it's just the Parmesan again.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Raw Parmesan, which you said is the only time
yeah,
technically
correct.
Parmesan.
Actual Italian.
Yes.
So I had eggs and I was like, okay. And then like a week passed and 2 weeks passed. And I'm like, okay, this is really weird. I'm not getting bothered. Did 5 years down the road, did I literally cure myself? So it's literally been 2 months of me eating. So for a while here too, I was eating about 3 to 5 raw eggs a day on top of about 6 eggs cooked. So I was eating about 11 eggs a day, including 5 raw, because raw are worse, harder on you, if you will. And I want, that's what I've heard. So I wanted to see how the raw eggs would do.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Well, I wonder what it is about egg whites. I mean, I know there's certain things in it. I forget what it is. I don't know if Pete, Dutch Carnivore, is still on, but he might know. He's got some great nutritional knowledge. But there is something about what's in egg whites.
the protein, I've heard it's the protein basis of the protein, something about that.
Yeah. Someone asked me, yeah, I've lost my taste for fruit. First of all, I never really had much of a taste for it. That was sort of, I never loved fruit. My wife loves fruit, spend a lot of money on fruit. But I never really had it. And I can't imagine eating a banana right now like that. It's almost disgusting. Like the idea of eating banana with
Mm-hmm.
so much sugar. And I used to love bananas. I think I would probably, if I ate a couple of raspberries, I would probably enjoy it. Like raspberries and cream.
Yeah.
Wimbledon is on, strawberries and cream. That's it. I'd probably
Yeah.
enjoy that a little bit, but I don't have a yearning for it. It doesn't feel like something I'd want to pursue. I don't know. What do you
Yeah.
think, Chad?
Yeah. Only thing I ever used to like were apple bananas from the islands, and you can't get those on the mainland. So I quit eating bananas because they're nothing compared. And then I liked pineapple because we go pick it after they'd go through the fields and leave some out there. We would go get. And once you've had like really fresh, so I only ate fruit that was local to where I lived. I never ate fruit here at all.
Which makes sense
So
because fruit has become so engineered. I mean, it's not natural
yeah.
anymore. We think of it as natural, but it's not, you know.
Well, we
Uh,
used to hunt and we would get strawberry guavas, and they're just these weird little hard skinned, gnarly things. And when we would hunt, we would literally just take like our bows and sometimes not even a water bottle, and we would just head out for the day. And we would just get whatever, like we would get coconuts on the way and just hack them open and drink the coconuts. Or we'd get strawberry guavas on the way and just chew them up and you spit out the seeds. But the strawberry guavas remain pretty untouched,
wow.
throughout time. And they're really kind of tart and they're almost all seeds inside and almost unedible. But they're good in a weird way to kind of quench and get a little bit of that fruit, but it's not like a fruit. It's
Very
just this
interesting.
weird, super seedy thing. And I believe that's how we were as ancestors, like a lot of us do. We believe, when we were hunting and if it came up and it was there, you could get it.
Mm, mm,
And that's, I think, how it was that way. And
very.
yes, I know the dairy has a lot of calories. The only thing I have is the Parm cheese for my no gallbladder, which I've kind of covered because I tried all these different things to kind of, I guess, help regulate the fat intake if I go over too much fat, and the raw Parmesan cheese helps me.
Mm.
But yeah, if I didn't have to have that with no gallbladder, and I can do it without it, but I have to be way more careful on how much fat intake I do. So for me, it's just kind of like it works.
It's interesting. So you don't find like you find that fat intake corresponds with weight gain. Like if you increase the fat a lot.
No, like literally having to go hit the head if I eat too much. So like the raw dairy slows down the fat and allows me to absorb it. Otherwise, it's just like 30 minutes later, I'm like, oh man, like I gotta
Yeah.
go hit the head,
Yeah.
and it just, and if I don't go over, I'm fine. Like a lot of us might not have to go hit the head for 3 or 4 days on this way of eating. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Naturally, we
Yeah.
might. And if I go over, boy, it's like I know it within a second. But if I eat the parm first, I think it's kind of in there. So as the fat comes down and hits it, and I talked to Dr. Baker about this a little bit, and he wasn't sure too if it was like the casomorphine, and its effect on me or whatever else. And we also know that, if you eat too much cheese, you can get constipated. So I don't know if it's also helping slow that down and kind of that effect. Like soft cheeses work as a negative to me. I don't like soft cheeses and I don't like other cheeses. I really only like this, and I only do maybe 1 to 2 ounces. I was doing a little more, but I'm down about 2 ounces.
Mm-hmm.
And the lamb doesn't have a lot of fat. So if I eat lamb, I'm pretty much okay, but then I need to add fat to bring up the lamb fatness.
Right.
And then, there's a weird thing too, and I'm curious for other people out there that are watching. Like I can have hard cold butter, like a couple chunks of it to bring the fat up, but if I like take butter and put that same amount, like say to make eggs, or put that same amount like melted all over the lamb and sop it up, it affects me differently. It runs through me quicker, kind of in a weird way. I don't know. And other people I've talked to have had this too.
That's
It's like
interesting.
rendered fat. Like I can eat all the fat on a chuck roast if it's not overcooked. But if it's like, in an instant pot and I pour it back over and try to consume it, it's too much.
I haven't. Yeah, that hasn't happened to me. Like
Yeah.
yeah, that's an interesting. That's an interesting point. I know I can eat more raw eggs. Like I love just cracking an egg yolk. I can eat more of those at a time than I could eat cooked eggs. And I
Yeah.
don't, I'm not sure why, but yeah, it's an interesting question. Yeah, someone said I have a very unhealthy relationship with butter. That's a new. I love it.
Yeah. I'm going to
I
get
think
down there.
butter. I don't know. Butter is one of with raw milk. It has a lot of fat, but I think it's very easy. Just like you said, it's easy to overconsume raw dairy, like cheese. I think the same is true of
Jonathan's in the
raw milk,
house.
but I don't. It doesn't seem possible to me to overconsume raw butter or not just butter generally. Maybe it is. I mean, it's possible to overconsume anything, but it's not easy. It's so easy to overconsume carbs. You can always have another donut or another piece of cake or
Yeah.
something. You don't feel it. It's much harder, and this is what Dr. Chafee says, to overconsume meat because it doesn't taste good anymore. And I feel too like our natural satiety signals. So for me, maybe this is not true for everybody, it's
Mm-hmm.
harder to overconsume something like butter. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's probably too something to do with the leptin response. I've
Mhm.
heard a lot about that. Your ghrelin, leptin, the ghrelin's your signal like, hey, I'm hungry. The leptin's the one that tries to shut it off. And I've heard a lot of other doctors talk about this, that gets kind of messed up by modern processed foods,
Oh
you
yeah.
know.
Oh
For
yeah.
for this Cam's dad on the pineapple, yeah, see, I used to get it because I kind of had access to some fields, but I also used to live on Lanai. And because it's a little private island, like after they harvest the pineapple, they don't chase you out of the fields like they do on Maui or the other islands. So it was pretty fun to be able to just walk out there and take whatever you wanted and nobody cared.
And
They were good. A lot of sugar in them,
yeah,
you know.
I wish that someone could do a study on how natural fruit, like where you picking it, some, even if you have an orange tree in your backyard or you're going right to the pineapple field, even though it's very sugary, I wonder if there's any studies on how that affects us compared to what you buy in a grocery store. Or
Picked green and given to you 30 days later kind of thing, you
yeah,
mean? Yeah. I
it's
don't know.
probably
That
a
would be
very hard
interesting.
study to do.
See, I think there's something to be said for like the natural stuff. Like, I know berries have changed. Strawberries now in the market. My friend was actually a non-carnivore friend was talking about this ironically. That they they
They
got
got
some
some strawberries.
strawberries. Was that mine or yours?
What?
Oh, I think I got some weird feedback on the audio all of a sudden. Anyway, um, it was like, he goes, the strawberries are so big. Oh, I think it was my daughter was saying that. Anyway, like, if you go, or no, it was somebody else. And anyway, if you go to some stores, their strawberries are smaller and better grade or whatever, and they're sweeter. Because like pineapples, for one pineapple, the sugar content's about the same. So when you buy pineapple, if you buy smaller ones, they'll tend to be sweeter. That's one thing I learned living on the islands. The same thing with a lot of stuff like that. And I do wonder how much there is of that natural ripened if it changes a little bit.
It does. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's a good question. Fortunately, we don't have to worry about any of this stuff. Isn't that? It's a good feeling. I mean, but it does seem intuitive that if you're in a place like Hawaii or a place where there's natural fruit, that occasionally you could have some. It's like a treat, and so at least it's consistent with what our ancestors would have done. And it depends on where they live, obviously, but we're so. I think one of the reasons being a very consistent carnivore can be healthy is we're not living that same kind of natural lifestyle our ancestors did. They basically were in the same place. I mean, they would, if they were in nomadic herds, they would travel to different regions, but they were in the general same area. They weren't going and living in Japan for a year or going and living in a different country. I mean, people didn't have that kind of change. And so
even the nomadics weren't traveling that far.
Right. So they were generally eating the same things, and their bodies adapted to that. Whereas, we're not adapted to living in a whole bunch of totally different climactic areas.
Yeah. And I could believe on the human the whole opportunistic thing is probably what it is. It's like if it's there, On the fruit, I'm curious, has it helped then if you get too skinny? Or, I mean, can you eat more, or does it just get too hard to eat more meat? That's what I'm always curious for some people that aren't. Because I'm one of those people, I never really like fruit, so I don't really care to add it back in. And I was even going to mention this with you in religion, and it kind of hit me the other day when I was watching something where it's like, somebody said something in another comment on a totally different channel, and I did kind of comment because they're like, oh, I don't know if I could do this, and they were asking somebody else, but it was like, tell me honestly, what are your cheat meals? How often do you cheat and everything else? I said, the only thing here's me, like I've been doing this, for 5 years plus years, about 6 with the keto. And it's like, I don't cheat. I don't need to cheat. If I want to have a cheat, it'll be some dairy. It'll be extra cream or something like that, but I stay in the carnivore space, and I consider that a cheat. In a sense, which is stupid because it's not, but that's what I consider maybe a treat or whatever.
It's interesting.
And people were like, wow, you must be like really disciplined. I go, well, yeah, no, but I think also, like, I know this might be a silly analogy, but I almost can look at it like sin. Us of a religious background and aspect, wow, she's extremely hot. Like, I can look at that and start sinning in my head, or I can just appreciate she's a person that looks good and then stop there and just get away from it or move on.
Good. It's a good analogy.
If I'm going to be doing something like drinking and I know that I don't drink, but to not get into that position, or if we're watching a movie and it's like, well, okay, this is getting a little bit uncomfortable, you're like, okay, that's a little bit racy, a little bit uncomfortable. Rather than keeping yourself in that position, you can pull out. And I think those commandments of not sinning sometimes are something that everybody faces. But if you don't have that religious, and I'm not trying to push this on anybody, but I'm just saying, from my perspective and maybe your perspective, we know that we have temptation of sin.
Mm-hmm.
And that ability to say, I don't want to step into that. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, I don't want to step into that zone. I'm already used to that in my daily life of like, what shows do I watch? Is it what I shouldn't be watching? Is it something, if I look at a girl, I don't want to have that lust, or is it something that you don't want to do those things? So you just naturally don't go there. Where to me, I just naturally know not to go there. I just know not to go to a bowl of candy.
Well, in Judaism,
because of that.
In Judaism, there's a concept called building a fence around the Torah. And that is the idea that there are certain core things that we don't do. And to ensure that we don't do them, we build a fence so that we don't do certain things that will even tempt us to do that thing. So one famous example is, if you go to an Orthodox synagogue, there will be no instruments played at a Sabbath service. Now, why is that? There's nothing wrong with playing an instrument on the Sabbath. Like, that's perfectly fine. In fact, that's. However, if you break a string, you have the attempt. So breaking a string is itself violating the Sabbath because you're destroying something.
That's interesting.
And then you might be tempted to fix that string, which is breaking the Sabbath. So in order to avoid that possibility, now one could say that's extremist, and I'm a Reform rabbi, but the idea is this is God's law. You cannot create or destroy on the Sabbath. So you build, and I think over time we become habituated to those laws. So in some sense, like my house, there is a lot of non-carnivore food. My wife isn't carnivore, my kids aren't.
Yeah.
It was harder at the beginning to kind of deal with that. Now it's sort of just, it is. I'm not really tempted. It also depends on stress levels. Like if I just had a pretty stressful day, it could be a little more tempting. So it's not 100%, but I do think our habits ultimately shape us. This is a big religious teaching. We choose to do certain things, and then those things start to shape what we choose to do. It's like the habits become us.
And if you do, like, okay, so you have one bite of something, it's like, to me, that's not a big deal. If you were doing it every day, it's like, then you're kind of balanced. But if it's like, wow, I haven't had that. And I've mentioned this before, like at Christmas, I might try a bite of something I haven't had since last Christmas. Or at Halloween, I would have one little bite of something just to see what it was like now. So even if you did go, oh, okay, well, oh, wow, honey, I haven't seen you eat that in forever. Let me try a bite, because you used to like it, whatever it might be.
Right.
And you're like, wow, I don't like that. Or like, wow, I like it. I do think sometimes even that test bite's okay, because then like, oh, wow, I actually don't like it. So now there's no temptation anymore.
Totally.
Or you like it and you're like, okay, I still like that. I know that's still a temptation I got to stay away from. So sometimes I think that ability to know, like for the 4th, like I told you, I bought a bag of pork rinds, which I haven't had in over a year. And they were, it was more of a memory. I don't know if I just don't care to buy them. But my kids got curly fries, and I used to like French fries and curly fries. And even the curly fries, because I had tried them one time, like maybe 3 years ago, I just had no care to even, you know what I mean? There was just absolutely nothing. It wasn't like, oh, I remember those. Those were so good. Looking at them. I literally just have this.
Some of the things we like curly fries, we may also enjoy the association with it. Like you enjoy sitting with your kids and eating some curly fries. And you can get some of that same thing by eating pork rinds with them or even just sitting with them. So it's
Yeah,
almost not the thing itself, it's the experience of it.
correct. I've heard
Yeah.
that oral fixation too, of like having to take something, put something, the crunch of something, whether that crunch is that or something else,
Hmm.
or and I think that's where they can be handy to break an old habit and leave them for that time that you desperately need them, where you won't go eating regular potato chips. That's
Yes.
what I say about the carnivore pizzas and the carnivore nachos. It's like, I'm not for them. I'm against
Right.
them if you've got a food addiction, but I'm coming from a food addiction personality side probably. So it's
Right.
like, avoid them. But if you want them there as a treat, go for it. And if you're fine with them, fine, go for it. But I think it's something that some people have to be careful with. And that's again just knowing
For sure.
yourself.
I used to love the egg wraps that you could get it. They're expensive, but they were good. Like for like if I wanted to have a carnivore sandwich, and I would take those. They're made out of egg whites primarily too, so there were some problems with them. But I found that they kept crave like when I stopped doing them, I didn't have cravings anymore for that kind of bread. So even though they're
Yeah.
technically carnivore and we're fine, they do make it harder to get rid of the cravings. And the cravings
Yeah.
naturally drop off after a while.
I think so.
Yeah.
What do you think about this? What Carnivore Scott said? I'm not sure what is a rote. What is
Something
that going to be
becoming
then?
just automatic. It's a great
Okay.
question. It's a
That's a
great
word I haven't
question.
heard.
I, I think I think it's okay for certain things to be rote. It's almost like manners. Like you want things to be somewhat automated so that, you say please and thank you. Yes, it's always good to remember why you're saying them, but I think so long as you're not a robot, that you do have some feeling of it, that it's okay for things to be kind of I would aim for automatic rather than rote. And then there are some times when you do want to remember the intention. You know, there is a danger of something becoming too rote for sure, where you start to take it for granted. But in some ways, when behaviors become automated, that can be kind of good because you're not, we only have a limited amount of willpower and calories. And so we want to be able to devote our thinking to big things. It's kind of like why some people like Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg, and I don't want to get political, but if you like Trump, maybe the guy wears the same thing every day. And Mark Zuckerberg wears the same thing every day. Steve Jobs wore the same thing every day. In some ways, that means you don't have to think about that so that you can devote your mind to other things that are a little bit weightier. So
See,
when
I do that.
yeah, yeah,
I have a couple of shirts. This one's a little different color because I wanted to try it, but my shoes are the same. I buy two pair of shoes and they're going to be exactly the same. All my socks are exactly the same.
yeah,
My pants, I got one with different color shorts and it bugs me, but they were on sale. So I went
yeah.
ahead anyway. But otherwise, like I have two styles of shorts I wear,
Mm-hmm.
one for outdoor activities and one for regular daily wear. And they do that because they have a specific reason and a purpose. But
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, my ideal wardrobe is like seven of the same shirt
Me too.
that doesn't change, and it bugs me. It actually freaks me out when I have if they don't quite. It's really weird. It's weird, but I can't stand it when I have options in clothing. I really don't like it.
That's just such a good point. And I think one of the distortions of modern culture is there's almost too much choice. You go to the grocery
Yeah,
store and there are 15 different types of ketchup. What? I mean, or 20 different kinds of chicken broth. I mean, chicken broth is chicken broth, ketchup is ketchup. And so
yeah.
it's just marketing. It's a way of creating choice where there really isn't, so that you can differentiate a brand and make more money. It's nothing about human fulfillment and human happiness. And so I think we'd be happier if there were just a couple of choices. So I think that's symptomatic of a consumerist culture. Yeah.
It's one of those things that, you know, I think too with like the rule thing. I would answer that like it depends on what the rule is and what it's for. Because
Mm-hmm.
it could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing. If it's a silly rule, silly to me might not be silly to you, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that would bring like, you know, then say bringing religion into there, what say the Jewish versus the Christianity religion, still the same things, but there's certain, I guess, rituals that you know what I mean, some Jewish people would have that Christians don't see of what it is. And it's even like, and I'm not sure what the exact names are on the door, you know, the thing on the door
Zuzah.
or the other. Yeah. So it's like, you know, is that, I don't know if that's a rule, but it's a thing that's there and those people get used to that. It's like taking off your slippers. You guys would call them flip flops, but taking off your slippers before you go into a house in Hawaii. You just don't go in with your slippers on, period. And that's just an unknown rule. So when you go to a friend's house and they're having a party, there's like 50 pair of slippers outside the house and nobody, you know, it's just those little unspoken, maybe it's those unspoken, you know, it's like you don't put your chopsticks in your food,
Yeah.
you know, for the Japanese thing. But if you're not in Japan and not dealing with Japanese people, does it matter? I guess that's maybe what I'm trying to get at, you know,
Yeah.
where
I
and when
like
and
that.
how it's applied.
Yeah.
Like in New York or Chicago, if there were slippers and it was whatever, and you walked into a house, some people wouldn't care.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's the culture. Well, in Judaism, again, there's a difference between custom and law. There are certain things that are laws, and there are certain things that are customs. And customs are
Mhm.
very powerful too. It doesn't mean you can't, customs should be enforced too. Now, will somebody kick you out of a party in Hawaii if you walk in with slippers? I don't know, maybe some will, but it's not like against the law to walk in with
No.
slippers, but it's a custom, that basically is pretty strictly enforced. And that's the
Yeah.
power of cultures. Yeah.
And it would be more like if you're trying to fit in with those people and you're new, they
Mhm.
might tease you in a good way. Oh, Malahini boy, you know, hey, leave the slipper outside. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
they'd rib you about it, kind of thing, in a good way. Otherwise, you know, there is that. But it's the same thing. If there was something that, you
Mhm.
know, like if I'm out for dinner and, you know, we pray before dinner.
Mhm.
If I'm with somebody that's not, I'm not going to make them try to do something I'm not going to do. And they by courtesy don't try to do some, you know what I mean? Do anything in that respect.
Mm, mm. Very
So I think
interesting.
there's that balance of, you know, common courtesy. Even at Costco, it's interesting. The other day when we were going through for 4th of July, I went up there to get some ground beef and some other, you know, stuff. And there's samples there all the time. And my boy was with me and they were giving out samples. And my boy's always saying thank you. And I would always say thank you, you know. And he's like, oh, that's nice to hear. We don't hear that too much. And you see all these kids. And it was really funny because we'd just been talking to this guy where my boy got some samples. And I was looking at something like 15 feet from the guy. And these kids came up and just grabbed stuff. And the sample guy is like, oh, you're welcome, like kind of loudly to him. And the kids were like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, you're welcome for coming and taking this. You're welcome. You know, you could tell he was trying to make them say thank you.
Oh,
And the kids just didn't
interesting.
even get it. You know,
That
and I kind of looked at him and he looked at me and just kind of gave me one of those.
is so interesting. I mean, definitely the culture's changed. I mean, I
Yeah.
think at a certain points in time, you were expected. I mean, I grew up in Houston, and so which is, the South until I was 11. And manners were pretty strictly enforced. You said yes, ma'am, or yes, sir. It's
Yeah.
pretty I don't that's not true there anymore. I mean, maybe in certain areas it is. But the culture has definitely shifted to people kind of doing whatever they want or feeling more entitled. I mean, that's part of the issues in our culture, and it's hard to come back from that. It's very hard to come back from that.
Yeah.
We just have
This
to do our
sequestered
own
by
thing.
customs. I'll give you a quick funny story. One of the times when I was coming back from Central America, and I'd been down there in Central America for about a year, and I was coming back through Texas.
Mhm.
Oh, don't be sarcastic to the border people. Because they're like, oh, what are you bringing back? And I said, well, I think I got rid of the dengue and the giardia. And I go, I don't know about the dysentery, though. Just as a joke, like, what are you bringing
Yeah.
back? And he was like,
Uh
he goes, well, what were you doing down there for a year? And I go, just hanging out.
oh.
He's like,
Great.
you were hanging out for a year. And I go, yeah, I was just hanging out. And he's like, okay. And he put my like passport in this colored envelope and made me, and I'm like, how come all they're going that way and I'm going this way,
Uh-oh.
And he's like, get over. And they grilled me for like 3 hours,
Oh, that
and
sucked.
I'm such a smart aleck too. Like when, he's like, okay, put your bag up there. And I went to put my bag up and he's like, no, the other one. I go, I knew you were going to say that. That's why I put that one up. Here you go. I
Oh
was that
no.
bad to even, and they just, you know, were drilling me for, like I said, I think it was about 2 or 3 hours. I stood there with these guys and they were just drilling me. And I'm like, look, man, I'm just down there diving, doing my thing. And,
Yeah, you
but
can't
yeah.
joke. It's like going through. That reminded me. I was traveling. Where was I? Oh yeah, I was in Jacksonville, and I picked up. There's this incredible store there. It's a South African grocery store, and they make this biltong, which is like
Oh,
South
wow.
African beef jerky with they have these special spices, no sugar. So I bought a whole bunch of biltong, and because you can't get this, it's so fresh, you can't get that here. um, and then I had a little cooler where I made sure I bought a cooler because I wanted to bring this home. TSA says you can bring a cooler through as long as the ice is frozen, so I had frozen ice packs, brought this biltong, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go through TSA, should be fine. And then I also had some Redmond salt with me that I picked up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, because we stayed at a hotel where you could cook. I only stay at hotels now where there's stove. So I had some Redmond salt. I didn't want to throw it out. It's $6, right? So I put it in the bag. I go through, my bag is flagged by TSA. I'm like, oh great, okay, there's something problem with the cooler. I'm gonna have to, throw something out, whatever. No problem with the cooler. Cooler's fine. The salt, they spent a half hour. I'm not exaggerating. I have people behind me are so mad. I'm like, I
Oh,
wouldn't have brought the
man.
salt if I thought it would be a problem. I'm sure they think it's cocaine or whatever it is. A half hour testing my freaking Redmond salt. You believe that?
That's funny.
Yeah, it was horrible. And so then people start sharing their stories with me. Some guy was telling me how he was on a vacation and he took some sand home with him, because he wanted to keep sand as a
Mm.
memory of the vacation. Also a half hour getting tested by TSA. What does this make any sense at all?
Well, I know one thing when I was coming back through Central America, I did have a lot of problem with the guys with is
Uh-huh.
I used to do a lot of fly fishing. So I actually brought a lot of my fly tying material down there with me.
Uh-huh.
And if it's like feathers and things and stuff like that, when you buy it in bulk, it's like still connected. And they
Oh,
were thinking
interesting.
like I must have been killing birds and bringing back like the rare wings and stuff. And I'm like, no, I go, that's why it's all preserved. And there's like all these fly companies, names on the
Yeah.
outside and what it is, this kind of
Yeah.
hackle, this kind of thing. I go, look, man, if there's a problem, just take it and chuck it. But it's
Right.
not. I go, why else would I be traveling in a place where I'm carrying like, 4 fly rods with me, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
4
Yeah.
different reels and like 8 spools of fly. I go, come
They
on,
can't
you got to
think.
look at the big picture here.
Right.
You froze up on
They,
me.
they they can't think. I think I'm frozen.
Yeah, your
Yeah.
video froze. Doot, 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 doot. But yeah, it was funny though, because they couldn't even put two
So
and two
weird.
together. A guy carrying that many rods and that many things, you know. I don't know if you can turn just the camera off and back on, maybe. the technical side of the fun. But that biltong, there was something like that too, I think, from the Asian side, because I remember that stuff. I want to start making some more of that kind of stuff though too on my own. Same thing with pemmican. I want to get into making my own pemmican. Gonna see what happens here when he comes back. Can you talk right now, Evan? He might be rebooting. But anyway, I think we didn't get to the whole fountain of youth effect too much on this today, but I think our original idea was about how carnivore helps us with aging, which maybe we'll have to come back to and see how that goes. So for those of you that are here, I'm curious then, after he was mentioning the biltong or jerky or pemmican, if any of you guys have had that or do that. See, I kind of find I don't need to snack that much, but I don't mind having it. I think he'll be back though. I think he'll be back pretty quick. I'm going to text him here really quick. Because it's even like those pork rinds I had that I haven't had in a year. I just kind of find I don't ever really care to snack that much these days. Oh, you added too much salt to the pemmican. I read a few journals, and I got to find this one. I had a really good one from this guy that lived with a bunch of people on the plains back in the 1800s. And I know that from the other research I did, the stuff with the berries in it and other things was actually more for the travelers coming across. And I forgot what they called, the wagon people. Basically, it's like their palate wasn't as kind of, I guess they catered to the sweet stuff. So the Indians actually, they would put in berries sometimes, but it sounds like they would not put in berries in their own that often. It was really more for the travelers and then the other people that wanted to buy it, because they had a big market where they would sell it a lot of times in these big bags. Did jerky now doing dry aged beef, and that's, yeah. So when you do the dry age in the beef, are you salting it first, or are you just drying it without the salt? Because I do a lot of dry brining with the salt for 2 days. Almost all my meat, I always dry brine. And I know if I'm trimming my meat, like I'll eat the trimmings raw all the time these days. On a different story. Oh, that's awesome. I like puppies. Did you keep them or did they go somewhere else? I want to get a dog again. I miss having dogs. Don't eat anything processed with names I can't pronounce. Yeah. There's so much of that anymore. And it's interesting because I was going to get some bratwurst for the grill because the kids wanted hot dogs and hamburgers, and I was going to get some bratwurst. And I'm like, oh, I can eat those. And I could eat them. But the fact that they had like 2 grams of added sugars in one bratwurst, it's kind of like, why even add that into the mix? I was just asking about like snacking other stuff, like you were saying the biltong, and I was saying about jerky. Sometimes I don't want to snack, but it's still there. But it's like the pork rinds I don't eat, and things like that. And it's kind of like when I was talking about pemmicans, pemmican, and how when I read this one history on it, how the Indians actually added the berries for the traveler people, like the wagon people and the other trappers and stuff like that. They would put it in sometimes, but they didn't care if they put it in or not. But that's when honey started going into it. Yeah.
I mean, I don't have the patience to make it. I know you can make, and it's really hard, but that's why I love carnivore bars. I mean, carnivore bars are freaking expensive, but they are phenomenal, and it's just pemmican.
Yeah.
It's
that's
the
right.
best.
I need to go talk to the guy about sponsor.
We should, his costs are so. I've had.
Yeah.
He's an amazing guy. his
Yeah.
costs are so high. He's not,
Oh, I
it's
bet.
just, yeah. But this biltong was very special. I'm
Yeah,
not
I'm
going
sure it
to,
was.
oh my God. I don't, in some ways, I almost treat it as a dessert. Like, so when I was
I was just gonna
traveling,
say
like,
that's your
yeah,
treat. That's your candy bar.
yes,
Like me, if I'm
yep,
gonna have some cream, that's my. I hate the word cheat, but that's your
yeah,
treat. That's your candy. That's your thing.
yes,
It's like I
yes,
even look at bacon that way because I don't eat bacon but once every 3 or 4 months,
yes.
and it's so
And it's
rich and
such a
so
good treat.
sweet. Yeah,
Yes. It's a great treat. And the truth is, this is what I advise people. If there, some people, they go through a rough patch, like maybe they just suddenly feel an onslaught of a lot of cravings. Bacon is a great tool to
yeah,
address that. If you set, or even biltong could be those biltong, like I would eat like 7 Wendy's patties and then have some biltong for dessert. And like so it was great. And there's really no it's just meat. It just has some different spices on it. It's
yeah.
a real cool thing.
Well, and it's
Um yeah.
makes me think of a point. Like I don't know. I always say stepping on people's toes. I see some people, and some of them have been doing carnivore a long time, and they still eat like a ton of different cheeses and are always making baked cheeses and grilled cheeses and doing this and making all these breads, which is fine.
Yeah.
But then some of them
Yeah.
are also like, oh, I really got to watch what I eat because I put on weight so quick. And my brain, at least the way I think, is like, well, why are you even doing all that stuff if you're kind of, if you're not complaining about it, don't worry about it. But if you're kind of like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this because I'm gaining this weight, but then you still do, it's like, just stop. But also, I wonder if that's what keeps some of these people like food addicted and craving. Cause I had some of those addiction problems, but because I just cold turkeyed everything and didn't do it, and I don't do it, and I know I could easily get back into it. I know without a doubt I could easily, if I kept eating dairy, I would have a constant battle with it. But the fact that I don't, and I just allow it to maybe come in once in a while besides the cheese, it's not a battle. And I don't make these alternative foods like carnivore breads that keep that sensory going. It keeps that, oh, I'm having bread, even though it's not, I'm having bread in their mind. And I think that's what keeps some people years down
Yeah.
this line of carnivore. It's the hook. It's that little hook in the. Does that make sense?
But they can't sustain it. Like that's like when I remember when I first started, I had pork rinds, I had a lot of them. Now I
Yeah,
really have no taste
I
for them.
did too.
But I could probably, as I think I could probably have a bag, enjoy it, and not feel addicted to it anymore. In some ways, the addiction, I mean, addiction is so complicated. I mean, it's not complicated in theory, but the way because we're programmed in a certain brainwashed in a certain way and addicted to carbs so early, getting over addiction is very difficult. But
Yeah.
once you've restored your natural satiety signals, the foods that may have addicted us before are not as potent as they once were. Like, now it could become that way, but and we have to have that self-knowledge to know when to stop, but it is much easier to stop because you've gotten out of that cycle. Um, and I think that's
And
true with pork rinds, you know,
and if you're coming like he's trying to, if you're trying to gain weight and you get too skinny, that's different than people that
different.
like, that have had a weight problem. I think it also does depend on where you come from. You got to immediately divide those people where they come from. Then you have to immediately
Yes.
take those people and divide them into the type that know they have a food problem and some that don't. I know I have friends that could keep whatever a bag of Swedish fish around and they would go bad by the time they would eat them. Me, the bag would be gone in 2 days, kind of thing. So I
Right.
think too, you got to separate those people and then separate them again, and then figure out what it is. But on that biltong, like if you had access to that and you had it every day, would it then be special?
It's an interesting probably not. Probably not. It would probably be something more like an occasional treat. Like I don't think it's addicting. So I don't
Yeah,
think I would overdo it,
But if it was just
It's an
say
interesting
something your
question.
wife made by chance, you know what I mean? Like if it was always around the house, would it just become like a food source? And I guess maybe my point is like I
Probably.
think sometimes like for me bacon and I used to eat a ton of it, and again I just slowly over the years pulled away from it as I don't feel 100% on it and I can't eat as much as I used to and I do better on the other meat. So for me to be go like, oh man, that'll be good. It's like the pork rinds. Like having them was kind of a fun and it was a memory thing, but I don't really care. I wasn't craving them. And I don't have to buy like
Mm,
5 or 7 bags or 10 bags anymore like I used to. And then it's
that's
there as a
interesting.
treat. And I wonder if some people kind of did just pull away from all that that have food addictions, again, to clarify.
Mm,
If they just pulled away from all that, and then when they're really jonesing for something, then go buy a bag of pork rinds and a little tub of sour cream and go at it.
mm,
Get
mm,
that addiction, that craving out of the way, or they save that bacon because it freezes so well, pull it out,
mm,
defrost it, and
mm.
just, you know,
Good.
go to town on
That's
bacon if that would be like kind of, oh, that was so good. If that would kind of crave that. I think that would. I think people should save those things more than make them a norm. Not saying save bacon, just to be clear, but save things that would satisfy a craving. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say? Like if you've got these food addictions in that first year, try to keep like if oh man, I just love bacon so much, so much. It's like just for fun, try to only have it once a week and see how you feel and see if it pulls
totally.
away. And then also that way you're like, oh, I can't wait for Sunday. I'm going to have my bacon. It might also show you
Right.
that, wow, I am kind of like radically addicted to this, but I can control it. So now you've got this. I know I'm addicted to it, but now I know I can
Good
control it every week.
self-learning.
So, and I'm going to move that out to now 2 weeks and see what happens.
Mm,
And you might eventually get to the point where, like, oh, I forgot to have it last week. And if you get to that point where,
mm,
like, oh, wow, I forgot to have that, now it's not ruling you, that you're controlling it. And then you could maybe bring
mm.
it back in and it wouldn't overtake you. That's how I think about some of this all the time.
Right. You kind of have to know yourself. I mean,
Yeah.
you do have to know certain people have to be very, very strict. And I think that that's hard in modern society. So in some ways they have to be almost rote or very I cannot even look at that. I can't even step in a grocery store. I can't even step in a bakery. I can't even try something like I can't go to a birthday party. And I don't think that's most people, but that's certain people. And then others, and I think you can experiment. You can try things and you just have to know yourself. And that's in some ways carnivore helps you know yourself much better. That and being open to failure or open to failure, failing forward, knowing, you know what, maybe I can experiment with dairy, but I can't experiment with this. It's a constant learning
Yeah.
process.
And that's the key thing, too, that I can say this from fairly long term and not as long as some people. It's still like the eggs. Who would have known this year, 5 years later,
Yeah.
wow, all of a sudden I can do this. And there's this radical
Mhm.
change. And again, I'm one of those people that never got bored on eating things. If anything, I'm more narrow minded these days on my eating than ever before. I eat
Mhm.
my lamb, I eat my chuck roast, I like my ribeyes, and I have an occasional other something ground beef or something else, but I could care less. I
Mm.
just I have no desire to buy tri tip. I have no desire to buy anything else. I just don't unless it's really
So
cheap on
you
sale. And
love
then
the
I
chuck
ask
roast.
myself, yeah, and then I ask myself if it's not cheaper in chuck roast, it's not about price, is it about taste? And it's why I do like I don't know what.
Totally
I'm really
random
trying
quick.
to
How much is a tri trip in your area? How much is that costing? Pound.
I can get it at the commercial Costco for about $8 a pound, and I think it's more. I think it's about $10 a pound at the regular Costco now, or something silly high.
I have a spot. There's a great sort of farm store. It's like my favorite place now, and they have phenomenal tri-tip grass fed. $8.95 a pound. That's so
That's a
I
good
bought a
deal.
whole bunch when I was there last time. I bought a whole bunch because I love it. That's basically I'm kind of similar. For me, it's like tri-tip now and flank. And I'll have, if ribeye's cheap, I'll buy some ribeye, but it's you get in a pattern. It's not about entertainment. It's about nourishment. And we figure out what nourishes us and what's simple and it works. And we don't need to be
Yeah.
tempted by, other things. Now, a deal can be a deal and you can have a little variety among that, but it's so
See, I
much
still
simpler
like
this
grain. I
way.
don't like grass-fed beef as much as grain-fed beef.
Yeah, got more
And
fat.
that's what's funny is,
Yeah,
yeah, it's just fattier and just a little
yeah,
different. And, because
yeah.
there's a lot of grass-fed beef at the business Costco where they don't have it at the regular Costco. I'm going to do a
This
video
this
on it.
oh, I want to see that. This is grass-fed, grain finished, so it's fattier. Um,
Okay.
that's really good.
Yeah. Because I know that's what a lot of meat actually is with the grass and then just finished
Yeah.
on the grains. It kind of depends, or they'll call it
Yeah.
commodity. Like the commercial Costco, you can buy commodity beef.
Mm,
Because usually you have like, the prime and the choice and all that, and select. And
mhm,
the commodity is more for like the major things because it comes in these big swift packing plant things. So it's going to be more like a choice or something you would get at Safeway or something that doesn't have the label on it. So it's never as
mhm.
good, but you can buy commodity meat there along with prime or choice or halal grass fed, grass finished meat.
Oh, interesting,
And even like in the
interesting.
freezer thing, you can buy these huge 50-pound boxes of goat bites, which or like lamb
Mm,
bites, which are just like cubed up
mm,
stuff, like
mm.
literally a 50-pound box. And I'll show you on the video when you guys see it, but it's like you can also buy whole lamb and whole goat there. They're just like
Oh, that's
hanging in the
great.
you just open
A
up the door and
whole
there's all
lamb
these
at Costco business.
whole
That's awesome.
whole lamb, whole
Oh,
lamb,
that's
whole goat,
fantastic.
half lamb in a box, half goat in a box. You can buy like
Uh, I
I think the boxes are 50 pounds. You can buy just lamb shoulder. You can buy just lamb leg. You can buy, all these different things and all these different quantities of a lot of weird stuff that not weird, but weird that you wouldn't get in a normal.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm gonna have to talk to you offline. I have to run, everybody. I have to
Yeah.
pick up one of my kids. It's so good to see everybody. What a great
Thanks
discussion
everybody.
today.
We
Yeah.
will talk to you guys soon. Ahoy ho.